When I was 17, my state was hit with a major drought. There was no rain for weeks on end, and record-breaking high temperatures. The grass died, the ground hardened, and the creeks and streams dried up. The local resort lake began to recede, pulling back almost 20 feet from its usual shoreline, revealing hard, cracked mud and bleached branches. It also revealed something far more sinister that no one in my town ever talks about. It was the current heat wave we are experiencing that made me remember that summer and all the terrible things that happened at Anders Mill. That summer started off with such promise. My friends and I had just graduated high school, and we were all going away to the same college in the fall. We were a close-knit group. There was me, Amy, the quiet one. Mark and Lisa were twins, and unlike most brothers and sisters, they got along really well. Lisa was my best friend, and we planned to share a dorm together that fall. Mark had two good guy friends, Nate and Carlos, who were planning on renting an apartment together near campus. Together we were the Fabulous Five, and we had everything to look forward to. Mark and Lisa's parents owned a property on the big lake near our town, Lake Run, where they rented bikes, canoes, kayaks, pedal boards, and other sorts of recreational equipment to people who came to play at the lake. The store also sold hiking and fishing supplies and served as the rental office for 5 or 6 small cabins the family owned in the surrounding forest. Business was terrible for them that summer with the unbearable heat and the lake drying up, which our group of friends took advantage of by spending half of our time playing around with the unrented equipment or spending nights away in the empty cabins. It was on one of those overnight trips that we first discovered the secrets of the drowned village. I should clarify, the mere fact that there was a drowned village was not a secret. When Lake Run was first built in the early 20th century, it had been an ambitious project with the goal of creating a hydroelectronic dam to provide power to a huge rural area, as well as creating an emergency reservoir for the big city about 75 miles away. The area that was supposed to be flooded contained only some logging camps, an old coal mine that had long since stopped being profitable, and a handful of small-time family farms that were mostly happy to sell. The village of Anders Mill was not supposed to be flooded. In fact, the engineers in charge of building the dam told the people of Andersville that their village would be well placed to transform itself into a lakeside resort town. The people of the village were thrilled with this plan. Previously, the village had been made up of mostly Italian and Eastern European immigrants, whose only opportunity for employment had been working in the foul-smelling paper mill owned by the Anderson family. The Andersons were some of the first settlers to the region, Swedish immigrants who speculated in land and made a fortune off lumber and paper, and who kept a stranglehold on businesses in the area. The Andersons owned the mill and also the general store, the feed store, the doctor's office. They were the landlords for most of the houses in town, and even kept a private security force for the mill that also served as the town's sole police force. It was quite understandable that when the people of the town heard that there might soon be another way to gain employment, something outside of the grasp of the Anderson family, they were thrilled. But the engineers who built the dam were very badly wrong in their calculations. Once the dam was built and the water began to rise in the newly formed lake, it became clear that Anders Mill would not be a lakeside village. It would be at least 15 below water. The state had to make a very rushed evacuation of the villagers and ended up paying everyone far more than what the property was worth in order to cover up the scandal. They said that some of the villagers refused to believe that the water would really claim the town and stayed in their houses until state officials had to force them to evacuate by boat. The whole thing was a huge mess, and many of the ordinary steps that would be taken before a town is flooded, like moving historic buildings or exhuming and moving graves, were completely skipped. Once the lake reached its maximum height, the only evidence that Anders Mill had ever existed was the remnants of the paper mill's smokestacks and the church's steeple sticking out of the water. 2 of the 3 smokestacks had fallen in the almost 80 years since the village was flooded, and the steeple looked like it would rot away soon too. They named the lake Lake Run in honor of the area of Sweden where the Anderson family originated as sort of an apology, and life went on. You might think that this would be something really popular to go explore. A sunken town half sticking out of the water seems like the perfect place to have a summer adventure, but something always kept people away. There were rumors that something malevolent lurked in the part of the lake around the Ender's Mill. Every once in a while someone would go up there to explore and come back with a crazy story. One man said he saw a large flock of birds circle the church steeple again and again in a frantic flight. Then the whole flock dove into the water and did not resurface. A park ranger on horseback reported that while taking a trail close to the area, his horse went wild, threw him off, ran into the lake, and drowned itself. The worst story I heard was 2 years before the drought summer. 3 hunters went up to the area around Anders Mill looking for a secluded place to pouch deer out of season. They were found several days later. One of the hunters had shot the other 2, then turned his gun on himself. One Friday in early August, Nate, Carlos, Mark, Lisa, and I packed up some light camping gear, a cooler with food and a case of beer supplied by Nate's helpful older brother, loaded up a few of Mark and Lisa's family canoes, and started our trip up the lake to Anders Mill. Although the water level on the lake was low, it was still perfectly navigable in the center. The lake itself was huge. It was long, narrow, and winding with many outlets, islands, and false turns the way most man-made lakes are. There was technically a trail that encircled the whole thing, which made about a 20-mile loop. However, almost no one ever hiked it. Anders Mill was at the far west part of the lake and was fairly isolated from civilization. There were no roads to drive to that part of the lake. The only ways to get there were to park and walk the trail or to go by boat. We took a lazy time pedaling up the lake. We stopped for lunch for a couple of hours and stopped again in the afternoon heat to swim, and overall made very slow progress. It was almost 6 p.m. by the time we pedaled around an outcropping in the bank and got our first sight of the village. We were fairly shocked by what we saw. We had expected that more of Anders Mill would be visible because of the low water level, but in fact, the whole village had been uncovered. Most of the buildings were completely gone, and everything was caked in a thick layer of hardened mud. However, there was a surprising amount that was still visible. We could discern where streets used to be by the lingering stone steps that must have led up to a long-gone wooden houses. We had to be cautious because there were clearly places that used to be stone-lined cellars or basements now exposed to the open air. There wasn't much to see on the ordinary streets of the town, but there was one house that looked like it had been made of stone rather than wood and was still in good condition. We went up and started poking around. The roof, doors, and windows were all gone, and all that was left was the skeleton of the 4 walls. Once we got inside it, there was a lot of debris and mud, but some objects were still sort of recognizable. Carlos found a large brass bed frame, which seemed to suggest that the second floor of the house had collapsed down into the first at some point. Mark found the remains of a large piano. Lisa and I found an area where the mud isn't so thick, and there were some personal items visible. I found a hand mirror with an orientally curved back and handle. Lisa found a small makeup compact that opened to reveal a moldy old powder applicator and mirror. Mark came over to check out what we were looking at and found the creepiest item of all. When he first pulled it out of the pile of wood and rubbish, we thought it was some kind of charm bracelet. Then looking at it closer, it was clear the charm was a locket, but it wouldn't open. The bracelet itself was strange. It was kind of brown, branded rope that I had never seen jewelry made out of before. Mark was holding it up to get a better look in the fading light when Nate came over. "Ew, man, I can't believe you were touching that. Those things creep me out." Mark looked at him like he was crazy. "Bracelets creep you out? Bracelets made out of human hair do," Nate replied. As soon as he said it, Mark dropped the bracelet and started asking Nate what the hell he was talking about. It's like a thing, Nate said. Like a thing people used to do back in the day. You know how my mom works at the museum? They have a whole display of jewelry and pictures and other shit made out of human hair. People would make it to give to their friends and family, or make it out of the hair of someone who died to remember what they looked like. Creeps me out, though. Lisa immediately started to laugh and poke fun at Mark, who was freaking out and wiping his hands on his pants. Nate had calmly gotten an old sandwich bag out of his backpack and picked up the bracelet without touching it, with the explanation that he wanted to show it to his mother and see if the museum wanted it. Mark, however, was out of the exploring mood and rather firmly suggested that we set up a campsite and work on dinner. Lisa and I put the compact and hand mirror into our respective backpacks and followed the guys back out of the town and into the woods. So far, I was feeling good about our little adventure. Nothing even remotely weird had happened, and I was starting to believe that most of the stories about Anders Mill being cursed or evil were just urban legends. That night was the first indication I got that I may be wrong. That night, well after dark, the 5 of us were sitting around the fire we had very carefully made, drinking and laughing when I started to get a weird feeling. It's hard to describe, but it was a feeling of dread. Like when you realize you haven't completed a major assignment, but class starts in 5 minutes and there is absolutely no time to do anything to fix the situation. Carlos was dramatically retelling some funny story we all had heard before, while the others were laughing and chiming in with the parts that he had forgotten. But I found myself getting quiet and listening to the forest around us. That's when I realized that I couldn't hear anything. Nothing at all. No cicadas, no crickets, no bird or animal noises. The only sounds were my friends laughing and the cracking of the fire we had made. I was almost in a full-on panic when I heard a crunch of leaves behind me. I screamed, jumped up, spun around, and shined the flashlight I was holding frantically back and forth in the woods from that direction. I could hear my friends asking what was wrong, but I ignored them until my light reflected back to me a pair of staring eyes. Lisa came to my side and added her flashlight beam to my own. In the combined light, I saw a deer. Actually, 2 deers, a mother and child by the looks of it. Nate and Carlos and Mark started to make fun of me for my overreaction, but Lisa, seeming to recognize that I had been genuinely scared, defended me by saying that it was weird that they would come right up to our camp like that. We lowered our flashlights a little and the deer turned to walk away. At that point, I noticed something weird. The mother deer was missing her back left leg from just above the knee joint down. I couldn't really get into the conversation that night, being unable to shake my bad feeling from earlier, but luckily we all went to bed soon after. The next morning I woke up early and was walking out of the camp to find a good place to pee when I saw it. The 2 deer from the night before were lying dead not 15 feet from our camp. The mother deer bore no marks, but her bulging eyes and swollen tongue clearly showed she was dead. The young deer, on the other hand, had been torn to shreds. There were limbs scattered everywhere. The torso looked like it had been partially eaten by animals because the poor beast's ribs were exposed through the bloody mess. The worst was the smallest deer's head. Someone had broken off a branch of a tree about eye level and forced the young deer's head into the stump, like some crude imitation of mounting a deer's head on a wall. As I screamed, the others came running, but they all stopped short with exclamations of disgust when they saw the gory scene. Eventually, Lisa said what we were all thinking. This was done by a person. At first, Carlos seemed like he wanted to argue. He muttered something about coyotes, but Lisa shut him down. Coyotes don't mount the heads of their prey, and they don't leave good meat untouched. It's so close to where we were sleeping, I said. How could all this happen without us hearing anything? No one had an answer. I looked around nervously. If someone had been quiet enough to do this while we were so close by, had they been watching us last night? Could they be watching us right now? I felt too afraid to say these things out loud, in case the person was listening. To my utter relief, Nate suggested we just pack up and head home, forget exploring the village for a second day. Everyone agreed, and soon we were back in the canoes pedaling back down the lake. I still remember those quiet moments, packing up and pushing off into the water in the morning sun with my friends, disaster was already stalking us, though we didn't know it yet. For us, it was the last happy moment of that summer, because although 5 of us left the campsite that morning, only 4 of us made it back home. Hey guys, thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join the Nightmare Army. I'm always looking for new soldiers in my Nightmare Nation. So guys, the story that I narrated is actually part of a series, and if you guys want, I will continue this series every Friday. And you know what, I think I might try to make that a thing. Maybe like for Friday, like No Sleep Fridays, I'll try to build it up into a series each time. So if you guys want me to narrate part 2, hit the like button or comment below. Let me know if you guys want more of this story. So anyways guys, I am going to see Suicide Squad tomorrow. Hopefully I am not disappointed. I have heard a lot of terrible things about it so far. Especially if you guys watch Chris Stuckman. He said the third act of the movie is almost like Fan 4 Stick. And yes, I call it Fan 4 Stick too, or Fantastic Shit. But yeah, after hearing that, I was like, oh god, $14 is going right down the drain. Just right plop down. But anyways, guys, hopefully I will like it. And I hope you guys all have a great weekend. And I'll see you all on Monday. As always, again, thank you all for watching. And just remember, the best ideas always come out of nightmares.